Tonight, a California school superintendent arrested in what officials called the largest trafficking bust in U.S. history.
3:47 a.m. Riverside, California. The San Bernardino Mountains loomed in the distance like silent witnesses. No wind, no movement, just the kind of stillness that precedes violence. The kind that makes veterans check their weapons twice. 18 unmarked vehicles moved through the industrial corridor south of the 91 freeway. No lights, no radio chatter. Inside were 162 federal agents from the FBI, C, and DEA, backed by 3 SWAT tactical units, and a mobile cyber forensics team, positioned in a converted shipping container 2 blocks from the primary target. Their destination was a facility called Harmony Learning Center. According to county record, it operated as a private K-8 academy serving 287 students from low-income families. It had state accreditation. It had a playground visible from the street. It had a waiting list of parents desperate to enroll their children in what local news had once called a beacon of hope in an underserved community. What it actually was would take federal prosecutors 3 years to fully describe in court documents. At 30:51 a.m., the first breach team reached the service entrance on the building's east side. Thermal imaging showed activity on the ground floor and concentrated heat signatures in a structure that extended beneath the parking lot, a structure that appeared on no building permit ever filed with Riverside County. At 3:53 a.m., the doors came down. The next 14 minutes would expose a trafficking operation so sophisticated, so deeply embedded in California's educational infrastructure, that investigators would later describe it as the most disturbing discovery in modern federal law enforcement history. The main floor looked exactly like a school, colorful bulletin boards, student artwork taped to window, a reading corner with beanbag chairs and picture books. An American flag hung in the front office, next to a framed mission statement about nurturing young minds. Agents cleared these spaces quickly. Classroom, bathroom, a small cafeteria with plastic trays stacked neatly on a rack. But the thermal signatures were coming from below. In the administrative wing, behind a door marked custodial supplies, agents found a stairwell that descended into darkness. The stairs were concrete, industrial, built for heavy traffic. They did not match the aesthetic of anything above ground. The basement level stretched far beyond the building's footprint. Preliminary measurements indicated over 31,000 square feet of subterranean construction. It had been excavated in phases over 7 years using falsified permits, shell contractor, and inspection waivers signed by officials who would later claim they had no memory of the documents bearing their signatures. The first section agents entered contained dormitory-style housing, rows of bunk beds, communal bathrooms, a commissary with packaged food bearing labels in Spanish, Mandarin, and Tagalog. The beds showed signs of recent occupancy, clothes hung on makeshift hooks, personal items scattered across thin mattresses. In the second section, they found them, 57 young women and teenage girls, ages 14 to 23. Some were asleep when agents entered. Others were awake, sitting in silence, waiting for something. They had been conditioned to wait, to stay quiet, to not ask questions. Medical teams staged outside were called in immediately. The youngest victim, a 15-year-old later identified as having been reported missing from Bakersfield 11 months earlier, looked at the agent offering her a blanket and said, "Are you real?" In the third section, agents discovered the inventory. Floor to ceiling shelving units held vacuum, sealed packages of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and heroin. Later analysis confirmed 4.1 tons of narcotics with an estimated street value exceeding $920 million. Adjacent to the drugs were crates of U.S. currency, sorted and banded. The final count would reach $127 million in cash. But the fourth section changed the nature of the investigation entirely. This room was smaller, temperature controlled, filled with server racks, encrypted communication terminals, and a command console displaying a live operational dashboard. The screen showed tracking data for 19 active transport routes spanning California, Nevada, Arizona, and Oregon. Each route was color-coded: blue for narcotics, green for weapon, red for human cargo. At the top of the screen, authorizing every movement, was a digital signature linked to a name that made the lead agent step back from the monitor. Superintendent Diana Mercer, director of the California Charter School Oversight Commission, and NRA 22 FBI Regional Cyber Forensics Division, Los Angeles. The servers recovered from Harmony Learning Center were priority assets. Within hours of extraction, analysts began the decryption process. What they found inside would require the formation of an entirely new task force. The operation had a codename Project Cornerstone. Harmony Learning Center was not a school. It was a node, one component of a statewide network designed to exploit California's charter school funding system while simultaneously operating as a logistics hub for the Sinaloa Cartel. The financial architecture was elegant in its corruption. Harmony Learning Center received 6 $2 million annually in public education funding based on enrollment figures that existed only on paper. Hundreds of phantom student attendance records fabricated by administrators who understood exactly what they were doing. That money flowed through a network of 23 shell corporations, companies with names that suggested legitimacy, educational technology providers, student transportation services, nutritional program consultant, facility maintenance contractor. None of them provided actual services. All of them existed to receive payments, obscure their origin, and redirect funds into accounts controlled by cartel financial operative. The money moved through banks in the Cayman Islands. It was converted into cryptocurrency. It was layered through mixer services designed to make tracing impossible, and it emerged clean, ready to purchase more product, more influence, more silence. Superintendent Diana Mercer had served in California's education bureaucracy for 26 years. She had testified before legislative committees on school safety. She had been photographed with 3 different governors. She had received awards for her commitment to underserved communities. And for the past 8 years, she had personally approved every license, every inspection waiver, every funding allocation that allowed Project Cornerstone facilities to operate without scrutiny. Her encrypted signature appeared on 847 documents recovered from the servers, authorization codes for shipment routes, approval stamps for facility expansions, coordination messages with cartel logistics coordinators operating under aliases in Culiacan. She had not been compromised. She had not been threatened. She was a partner, a full participant in an enterprise designed to traffic human beings and flood American communities with fentanyl. One analyst, a 17-year veteran of federal cyber investigations, stared at the network diagram filling his screen. A web of connections so dense it looked like a spider's work. He said something that would be repeated in briefings for months. This is not corruption. This is command-level collusion. She did not just enable this, she engineered it. The servers also contained references to 9 additional facilities operating under the same model across California. 9 more schools, 9 more basements, 9 more pipelines feeding the same machine. Project Cornerstone was not an operation. It was an empire, and it was about to face the full weight of federal law enforcement. 50 a.m. Day 2. Los Angeles Federal Operations Center. A digital map covered an entire wall. Across it, dozens of red markers pulsed in locations spanning the length of California, from San Diego to Sacramento, from the Central Valley to the coastal cities. Each marker represented a confirmed target linked to Project Cornerstone. Operation designation: Cornerstone collapse. The task force assembled for this phase included over 1,800 federal personnel, FBI, ICEDEA, DH, SWAT tactical units from 6 jurisdictions, air support from Customs and Border Protection including 3 Black Hawk helicopters, naval intelligence assets monitoring Pacific shipping lanes, even a liaison from the U.S. Army's Criminal Investigation Division, present because initial evidence suggested military supply chains had been compromised. The targets were struck simultaneously at 5:30 a.m. In San Diego. Agents raided a charter school called Pacific Futures Academy. The building had been undergoing perpetual renovations for 4 years, according to permit record. Inside, they found no construction. They found a fentanyl pill pressing operation capable of producing 500,000 pills per week. 2.8 million fentanyl pills were seized. 7 workers were taken into custody. None of them spoke English. All of them had been trafficked from Sinaloa. In Fresno, a residential treatment facility for at-risk youth was breached. The facility had received state funding for 8 years. Its director had won humanitarian award. In the basement, agents recovered 31 young women being held for transport to distribution points across the Southwest. Medical examinations confirmed systematic abuse, forced drug dependency, psychological conditioning designed to eliminate resistance. In Oakland, a commercial warehouse registered to an agricultural equipment company was found to contain a tunnel entrance. The tunnel stretched 300 feet toward the Port of Oakland, emerging in a shipping container storage facility. Agents estimated the tunnel had been operational for at least 5 years, moving tons of narcotics directly from cargo ships into the distribution network. In Sacramento, a nonprofit organization providing educational services to immigrant families was identified as a recruitment front. Staff members would identify vulnerable individuals, promise scholarships or job training, and then facilitate their transport to Project Cornerstone facilities, where they disappeared from any official record. In Los Angeles, Superintendent Diana Mercer was arrested at her home at 5:34 a.m. She was dressed in a business suit. She asked if she could bring her phone. She was told no. She did not ask why. By noon, the operation had yielded 147 arrests, recovered 203 trafficking victims, seized over 3 tons of narcotics including fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine, and frozen $341 million in assets connected to the network. Federal officials would later describe it as the most significant single-day action against cartel infrastructure ever conducted on American soil. But investigators knew they had only exposed the surface. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. Forensic teams examining the seized servers found evidence that Project Cornerstone had compromised law enforcement at multiple levels throughout California. In Los Angeles County alone, 34 officers were identified as having received payments totaling over $1 million through shell company disbursement. Their roles varied. Some provided advance warning of inspection schedule. Others altered patrol routes to avoid transport corridors. A few had actively participated in the movement of victims between facilities, using official vehicles to ensure convoys were never stopped. One sergeant, an 18-year veteran with commendations for community policing, had personally signed off on 27 transport movements that matched server logs. He had done so believing he was protecting witnesses in an ongoing investigation. He had been lied to by his commanding officer. That commanding officer was also on the cartel payroll. In the California Department of Education, 7 senior administrators were found to have approved fraudulent school registrations, inflated enrollment figures, and falsified inspection reports. They had done so for years. Their email records showed coordinated communication with Superintendent Mercer, who had coached them on exactly what language to use and what questions to never ask. One administrator, when arrested, told agents she had known something was wrong for 3 years. She had seen the discrepancies. She had noticed the pattern. She had said nothing. When asked why, she offered a single sentence: "I have a mortgage. I have children in college. I told myself it was not my problem." That phrase appeared in multiple interviews. Not my problem. It had become permission, a way of seeing obvious warning signs and choosing blindness. But the most disturbing revelation came from analysis of internal communication law. Project Cornerstone had maintained a parallel oversight structure, a shadow system that monitored legitimate law enforcement activity and adjusted operations in real time. When federal investigations were initiated, the network knew within days. When raids were planned, facilities were sanitized. When honest officers got too close, they were transferred or discredited. The system was not just reactive, it was predictive. It had been designed by someone who understood exactly how American institutions operated and where their vulnerability lay. That someone was referenced in the files only by a codename: the Architect. Analysts believed the Architect operated from within the Sinaloa cartel's senior leadership, possibly from a compound in Durango. But the sophistication suggested someone with deep knowledge of American educational system, someone who understood how funding flowed, how oversight failed, how trust could be weaponized. The search for the Architect would consume federal resources for years, but the immediate priority was clear: dismantle everything that remained and ensure this could never happen again. What investigators uncovered in the following weeks painted a picture of systematic exploitation that challenged comprehension. Project Cornerstone had operated for approximately 8 years. During that time, conservative estimates suggested it had trafficked over 200 individuals across state lines. The majority were young women and teenage girls recruited through false promises of education, employment, or immigration assistance. Many had been held for years. Some had given birth in captivity. The narcotics pipeline had moved an estimated 19 tons of fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine into American communities. Street-level distribution connected to Project Cornerstone supply chains was linked to over 700 overdose deaths in California alone. In some neighborhoods, the fentanyl that killed high school students could be traced directly to pills produced in basement operations beneath buildings that called themselves schools. The financial network had laundered more than $3 billion through educational funding streams, shell corporations, and cryptocurrency exchanges. That money had funded cartel operations across 5 countries and purchased influence at every level of government. And all of it had been hidden behind the most trusted institution in any community. Parents had dropped their children off at buildings that served as fronts for international criminal enterprise. Teachers had worked in facilities with hidden basements they never suspected existed. Inspectors had approved permits for construction projects that were never built. Politicians had accepted campaign contributions from organizations that existed only to launder cartel money. The system exploited something fundamental about how communities function. We trust schools. We trust educators. We assume that institutions serving children have been vetted and monitored and held to account. Project Cornerstone weaponized that assumption. It understood that the best place to hide something monstrous is behind something innocent. And for nearly a decade, It worked perfectly. The aftermath of Operation Cornerstone collapse extended far beyond arrests and seizures. In California, the state legislature launched emergency hearings on charter school oversight. Governor Marcus Blackwell, fictional head of state, called it the most devastating institutional failure in California history. New requirements for facility inspections, financial auditing, biometric access tracking, and background verification were fast-tracked through committee with bipartisan support. In Washington, federal agencies began coordinating on new protocols for identifying institutional fronts. The FBI established a dedicated unit focused on what they termed trust-based infiltration, the recognition that schools, churches, hospitals, and nonprofit organizations could serve as cover for criminal enterprise required new investigative frameworks. For the victims, recovery would take years. Many had been held for months or years. They had been systematically isolated from family, subjected to psychological manipulation, and in many cases, forcibly addicted to drugs to ensure compliance. Specialized treatment programs were established across California to address their specific needs. But the trauma they carried would not dissolve with time alone. It had become part of them. For the communities affected, the questions would linger even longer. How did this happen here? How did no one notice? How do we trust again? Those questions have no easy answers, but they point towards something important. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it operates through silence, through paperwork, through systems that appear legitimate because no one thought to look beneath them. The Sinaloa cartel understood this. They understood that the most effective infiltration is the one that never triggers suspicion. They understood that a school with a good reputation is more valuable than a warehouse with armed guards. They understood that trust is the ultimate cover, and they exploited it until federal agents kicked down a door at 3047 A.M. and found 57 young women who had been waiting for someone to remember they existed. This story is a warning. It is a reminder that the institutions we trust most are also the institutions most vulnerable to exploitation. It is a reminder that oversight is not bureaucratic inconvenience, but a safeguard against exactly this kind of systematic abuse. It is a reminder that silence, when faced with obvious wrongdoing, is not neutrality, it is complicity. The fentanyl that moved through Project Cornerstone killed thousands of American sons, daughters, parents, friends. Each one a life ended or a family shattered because a pipeline remained operational for 8 years, while people who should have noticed chose not to look. The young women held in those basements lost years of their lives. Some will never fully recover. They were not statistic. They were human beings with names and futures that were stolen by a system designed to treat them as cargo. And the officials who enabled it, the superintendents and administrators and officers who signed the documents and looked the other way, they did not think of themselves as criminals. They thought of themselves as professionals doing their jobs, following instructions, checking boxes, collecting paychecks. That is how systems fail. Not through dramatic betrayals, but through small accommodations, through the quiet decision not to ask questions, through the comfortable assumption that someone else is handling it. If you are still watching this, you understand why these stories matter. You understand that awareness is the first line of defense against exploitation. You understand that every time a story like this is told, it becomes harder for the next operation to hide in plain sight. If you want to support the work of agents who put their lives on the line to rescue victims and dismantle these networks, tap like so this reaches more people. If you believe that corruption at every level needs to be dragged into the light, comment the word exposed below. And remember, this story is fictional, created for dramatic storytelling. But the systems it describes, the exploitation, the infiltration, the weaponization of trust, these are real challenges that communities face every day. The question is not whether it can happen here. The question is whether we are paying enough attention to stop it before the next basement is built beneath the next school that nobody thought to question. Stay alert, stay informed, and never assume that a building with a playground and a flag is what it claims to be. Because sometimes, the nightmare is hiding behind the most trusted door in town. And sometimes, the people paid to protect our children are the same people selling them.